Takadosh Boker Or Masechet Zevachim Daf Yomi Daf Tzadigim Amud Aleph 93a1 says the Gemara Ba Mine Rami Bar Chama Rav Chasta. Ask Rami Bar Chama from Rav Chasta. Nitaz al Beged Tameh. If you've got blood that comes from a chatat, which is tahor, and it sprinkles on a clothing, which is going to be tameh. Mahu, what's salachat? Do you have to clean this clothing or not? So Amar Ravuna b'Rav Yeshua says Ravuna b'Rav Yeshua midekamibai lehachi. The fact that we're asking such a question, Shema Mina, we're learning from here. Haitala shata kosher. The fact that you had a time where it's going to be kosher, v'nifsila, and then it becomes pasul, right? Which means it becomes tameh. And dama ta'un kibus. So therefore, the blood is not going to cause anything to. It's not going to cause it. You have to wash it. Hanemile, but one of these words, pazeh acharze, only in a case where the blood became pasul, and afterwards it went on top of the beged. Aval, however, though, bevat achat, what happens if it's at the exact same time? Which means that it became tameh, right? The beged became tameh, and the blood became pasul. No, not. Or dinar, maybe loshna. There's no difference. That at the end of the day, even if you're going to have a beged which is nitazal of dam pasul, you're not going to be obligated in the kibbutz. So Elmaleh, so he says plukta de Rabbi Elazar Rabbanan. This is actually going to be a machloka between Rabbi Elazar and the Rabbanan. Aliba de Rabba, according to Rabba, it's Abaye, and just like Abaye is going to answer. Titana, as we learned in the Braita, Rabbi Elazar says, Mei chatat, when you have the waters of a chatat, shenitzmeu, that becomes tameh, metaharin, right? Still, it's going to be. That means you've got the mayim which are for the para aduma, which become tameh. It's still going to be mitaher from tumat met. Now he says, what's the proof? Shadenida. Look at an nida. Mazina lea. They're going to come. They're going to sprinkle onto her, right? The waters of the para aduma. Now, 1 second. She's still going to say anida, meaning anida, right? Imagine right now a woman's anida. How does she get out of it? She has to have she has to wait for the days of the nida, and then she goes to the mikveh. Does sprinkling the paraduma help? No. But if she was tmemet, which means that she became impurified from a dead body, they sprinkle on to her, right, from the waters of the paraduma. This is a proof that even though she's still going to stay tumat nida, but the waters of the paraduma still help her to take away the tumat met. So the same thing, even though the waters of the paraduma became impurified for whatever reason, they could still take off the tumet met, right? That means don't say they became impure. That's it. No, it could still take away the tumat met from a human being. Amar Rabba, and Rabba comes and he says, he says Rabbi Elazar, according to Rabbi Elazar, b'shitat Rabbi Akiva Rabba Omara. Rabbi Elazar was talking about the shita of Rabbi Akiva, right? He says the Amar, because he says havarat kli al gabe makom tameh. When we're talking about havarat kli, right, on top of a place which is going to be tameh. So he says, Kimunach tami. It's like consider that it's already there. The Trambas we learned in the Mishnah. Haya omed chutz tanur. Right? If he was standing right now outside of the tanur. You got right here. Yeah, haya omed chutz tanur. Yeah, he says like this. He says if you're going to be outside of the tanur, the sheretz tanur. Now there's a sheretz, right, inside the tanur. So therefore the tanur becomes tameh. Now you come and you take out your hand, right, from on top of the tanur, right, to the chalon of the kotel. Now you took a jug, right, of the mechatat, which is in the chalon. And you come and you're going to put it right on top of the tanur. Rabbi Akiva metameh. Rabbi Akiva says that the water is going to be tameh. The Chachamim are going to say that the water is going to be tahor. Uvehapligin. This is the machloka between them. Rabbi Akiva savar, but Rabbi Akiva holds kimunach tami, that it's considered that ki'ilu it's going to be on the bottom of the tanur tameh. Rabbanan sabri love kimunach tami, that the kad is not considered that it's all the way on the bottom, which means, right, just like the case of the nida, right, shizu aleh me'achatat. According to Rabbi Akiva, the waters become tameh when it goes inside of the airspace which is above it, right? So he says even though it's not mamash on her body. So if so, and still she becomes pure, so it's also the mechatat that became tameh before the sprinkling is still kosher for haza'ah. Abai is going to ask a question on this. Rabbi Akiva is going to be modeh to do with haza'ah, that it was going to be hevira me'al gabe kli cheres, which is going to be on top of the kli cheres, or gabe mishkav moshav tameh, or on top of mishkav moshav that is going to be tameh, shehi teora that is going to be tahor, she'en lecha davar shemetameh lemala ki lemata, because there's nothing which is going to be mitameh above like below, ela kezait minamet, ushar kol ma'alim. Just a kazait min hamet, or all the other things, which is just tumat ohel. La'tuye even amenugat, which is going to come and going to include an even that has tzaraat, which is also mitameh be'oel. Remember that certain things are mitameh be'oel, which means that even if it's not going to be in the airspace, anything in the airspace is tameh. That's called mitameh be'oel. So tumat met is going to be that you need a kazait of basar met, right? You need a kazait of the deceased person in order to be mitameh, or even mugat, right? Is also going to be mitameh be'oel, which is basically an even that has tzaraat. Okay. So he says, Ela rather, Amar Abaye says, the Chuli Alma, according to everybody, love kimunach tami, it's not considered munach. So here, what are we dealing with? Rabbi Kiva Savar, Rabbi Kiva holds, Kazrina and Shema Yanuach. We make a gezerah, maybe it's going to let rest. For Rabbanan Savri and Rabbanan hold, lo Kazrina, we're not going to say that it's going to rest, which means this. If something goes through the airspace, do I look at it as if to say that it's already down here? So the minute, אפילו אם זה באוויר, אני מסתכל כאילו שזה מונח, or not. So the rabbis, they made a gezerah, right? So the Rabbanan hold, slicha, Rabbanan Sabri lo gazrina. We do not make a gezerah, right? That it's going to be landing. And according to Rabbi Kiva, yes, right? So he says, right? So he says, Umoder Rabbi Kiva bazah, given the nafak. But Rabbi Kiva holds that when you come and you do hazah, which is sprinkling, once you sprinkle it, that's it. You sprinkle it left. It's not that you're putting something like this and now you're going to put it down or not put it down. If you put it down, it would have become tameh. If you would have left it up, no. So the rabbis already say, you know what? The second that you put it over, maybe you're going to put it down. So therefore, automatically becomes tameh. According to that's according to Rabbi Kiva. According to Rabbanan, we don't make such a decree. So he says, "Bilazar Rabbanan might come in." So what is the machloket then between Bilazar and Rabbanan? So he says, Amar Abaye says, Bedanin tum'a keduma mituma shebeota she'at kamipalgeh. They're going to be arguing, are you allowed to learn a din of tum'ah, which was once upon a time, from the din of, right, of the what we mentioned during that time. More savar danin, or more savar and danin. The Rabbi Lazar comes and he says that we're going to learn it. So therefore, if we're going to find that they're going to sprinkle from the mechatat onto the nida, even though the water became tameh. Remember, one more time, the waters of the paraduma became tameh, and you're still allowed to sprinkle it on the nidat to remove not impurity, because she doesn't become impure, she doesn't become pure with it, but to remove, right? What are you removing? You're removing the tumat met. Umor savad and danin, but the other one says that we do not do it. So Rava comes and he says, Techuli alma and danin. According to everybody, we're not going to judge this. Here, the machlok between them is going to be that Rabbi Elazar savar hazat tzicha shiur, that hazah needs shiur, umitzarfin lahazaot, and you're going to be betzaref otam two different hazaot. Rabbanan Savrin, the rabbis hold, and tzichin shiur, that you do not need a shiur, right? Whatsoever. You don't need any type of a shiur. You remember we spoke about when you sprinkle, do you need a certain measurement, like a certain measure of how much you have to sprinkle on the person or not? We're talking about the waters of the paraduma, right? Me'efer chatat, right? That you're going to come, you're going to sprinkle. Does it need a shiur or not? So according to Rabbi Lazar, he holds hazat sicha shiur, and therefore you're going to be mitzaref a few hazal together to get to the shiur. But according to Rabbanan, hazah and tzichin shiur, and therefore even the zava tipa is going to be already enough. Okay, and it's going to purify. Chatat pesula. So he says, Tanu Rabbanan, we learned in a Braita. Midama. What does it mean, midama? Midam keshera velo midam pesula. It has to be from dam keshera, not dam pesula. Rabbi Kiva says, Haitala shata kosher, if it had shata kosher, v'nifsela, and it becomes pasul, tamata un kibus. The blood needs kibus. Right? Velo haita la shat kosher. But if it didn't have a shat kosher, v'nifsela, and it becomes pasul, and damata un kibus. So then we do not need kibus. Rabbi Shimon says, Echad ze v'echad ze, and dama taun kibus. He says the blood is not going to come and need a kibus. My tamad Rabbi Shimon, what's reasoning with Shimon? Ketiv, it's written otah. What does it mean otah? So he comes and he says uchtiv midama. Where he says chad lehecha de hayta la shata kosher, vechad lehecha de lo hayta la shata kosher. It all depends whether it had shata kosher or didn't have shata kosher. For Rabbi Kiva, and according to Rabbi Kiva, otah is prat letruma. It's coming to exclude truma. Yeah. Right? So he says Rabbi Shimon letamen. Rabbi Shimon goes according to his reasoning. Tamar kadashim kalim en terunim rika ushtifa v'chol shken teruma, and all the more so teruma. Okay. Now we're going to start the Mishnah. Okay, so the Mishnah is on the bottom of Tzadik Gimel Amud Aleph 93a on the bottom of the page. Im natami netzavar. Well, we need that one. Not already there. Yeah. Nitaz min atzavar. Yeah, nitaz min atzavar. Yeah, he says like this. Nitaz min atzavar al abeged. Tzadigim lamud aleph on the bottom for the third time. Yeah, nitaz min atzavar min abeged. Yeah, just wait 1 minute until he comes back. Okay. So he says like this: Nitaz min atzavar ala beged. If it's going to be that it's going to be sprinkled, it's going to spritz out from the tzavar of the chatat directly onto the beged. Eno ta'un kibus. It's not going to need a kibus. You don't have to wash the clothing. So he says mina keren. If it's going to be from the keren of the mizbeach after it was already done, umina yisod, or from the yisod of the mizbeach, right? So he comes and he says, right? So he says like this: Umina yisod, eno ta'un kibus. We do not need kibus. Nishpach, right? Nishpach, right? Ala ritzpah. If it's going to be nishpach ala ritzpah, va'asafo, right? And now you come and you gather the blood from the ground. So he comes and he says. So says the Mishnah on the bottom of Tzadik Gimel Amud Aleph. One more time. Nitaz min atzavar ala beged. If right now it went straight from the tzavar of the chatat straight to the clothing, eno ta'un kibus. You do not need to do kibus. You don't have to wash the clothing. Mina keren umina yisod. But if it came from the blood, from the keren, or from the yisod, from the corners, or from the yisod, which is the foundation, eno ta'un kibus. It also does not need kibus. But nishpach ala ritzpah v'asafo. But if it fell on the floor and then you came and you gathered it together, en ta'un kibus. You do not need kibus. En ta'un kibus ela min adam shenikabel bekli. Because you only need kibus when the blood came from a utensil, right? And the shara'ui la'azan, it's fitting for hazan. Meaning, one more time, for you to wash the clothing of the kohen, any kohen that got his clothing dirty with blood, he only has to wash it. He's required to wash it only if it was accepted in a utensil, in a kli sharet, after the shechita, and it was fitting for haza'ah. The previous Mishnayot, we learned that if it's not fitting for haza'ah, you do not need to wash the clothing. And here we're learning also that if it did not go into the kli sharet, you do not have to wash the clothing. Says the Gemara, Tanu Rabbanan, we learned in a Braita, Yachol nitaz min atzavar ala beged yetam kibus. I would have thought to say that if it's going to be sprinkled, the blood from the tzavar of the animal, from the neck of the animal onto the beged, that you need to do kibus. Tamulomar comes to teach you. Asher yizeh. What does that mean? It has to be blood which is fitting for haza'ah. If the blood is going to be fitting for haza'ah, so therefore it's going to be tameh. Okay, well, sorry, it's not going to be tameh. It's going to be tameh the clothing, which means that it's ki'ilu, that you're obligated to wash the clothing. It doesn't actually make it tameh, because again, everything here is tahor, but we're talking about that it's going to impurify, that you're obligated to wash the clothing. V'tanya idach, afterwards, right? Questions. So he says, V'tanya idach, we also learned in a Braita, Yachol, I would have thought to say, nitaz, right? He says, nitaz mina keren, right? He says, nitaz mina keren, umina yesod, if it's going to be from the keren and from the yesod, yehe taun kibus, it's going to need kibus. Tamulomar comes to teach you, asher izeh. What does it mean, asher izeh? Prat lezeh shekvar huzah. When it says that it's already been done, the sprinkling. Meaning, one more time, you've got your clothing. You're the Kohen, right? Any Kohen. The Kohen has his clothing. If it gets dirty from blood, so not all blood will require you to wash the clothing. Which blood? We said it has to be inside of a kli sharet, which means that when they come and they do the shchita, they receive it in a receptacle. That's called a kli sharet. And it has to be that it's fitting for hazah. If it's not fitting for hazah, you do not have to wash the clothing. I got dirty with blood. It doesn't matter. You didn't. If it fell on the floor, then you picked it up. and therefore, it did not come and it did not get right directly from the keli to your clothing. You don't have to wash your clothing. Another one says the Gemara now, if right now what's going to happen is, if right now what happens is that it's going to go, right, to the yesod or to the keren. What does that mean? You already sprinkled it. If you already sprinkled it, so now once it sprinkles and then it ricochets back to you, that's already okay. You don't have to wash your clothing. It was in a kli sharet. It was during the sprinkling. It was fitting for hazah. So says the Gemara, when it says asher yizeh ela ra'ui la'azah, that's coming to exclude something that was already yuzah. This was already sprinkled. So since it was already sprinkled, the fact that it ricocheted afterwards and went onto your clothing, it's not going to obligate you to come and to do the washing of the clothing. Okay? Nishpach al ritzpa. What happens now? Says the two dots on the bottom of the page. Nishpach al ritzpa. If it falls on the floor, right? And now we said that you do not need to wash your clothing, right? So it says to the Gimel Amud 93b. Hatu lamali. Why do we need another case? Yeah. Why is it that we need another case that you don't need kibbutz unless it's going to be nitkabel and a kli, right? We already know that, right? We already know that from the previous part. So he says no. Matam kamar. It's coming to give you a reason. Matam nishpach al rispa vasafo entaun kibbutz. What's the reason why, if it falls on the floor and you gather it together, you do not need to do kibbutz? We just said that if it falls on the floor, is it fitting for hazah? No. So therefore, that's why. Meaning it's a reason. The reason why you don't have to wash your clothing is because, right, is because what? Is because since it's not fitting for hazah, that's why. So it's only explaining a reason. That's all that it's doing. It's not doing anything else. Right? That's what the Gemara is coming to do. Right? Now, he said that it has to be fitting for haza'ah. Lemi'ute, this comes to exclude kibel pachot mikde hazaya biklize upachot mikde hazaya biklize. What happens if I accepted the blood in two different cups? Two different klisharets. No mixed. The same blood. I've got blood of an animal. They do shchita. I come and I bring the first cup. But I only accepted less than kedei hazah. And then I took another cup and I accepted less than kedei hazah. That's what it says over here. Kibel pachot mikdei hazaya biklize upachot mikdei hazaya biklize. The Tanya, as we learned, that we said over here, that this blood is pasul for hazah. It does not help to do hazah with this blood. Yeah, it's not a shiur, so you're not allowed to do it. We're going to see. Okay? No, that's what we just said. It's pasul. So he says, the Tanya, as we learned in a Braita, right? Rabbi Chalafta bar Shaul omer. Rabbi Chalafta bar Shaul says, Kiddush. What does it mean now, Kiddush? He comes and he says, Kiddush. What does it mean, Kiddush now? He comes and he says like this, Kiddush Adam mechatat, right? Which means, Shiniach et efer hapara b'mem mayan, which is going to be pachom mikdei hazaya b'klizeh, ubachom mikdei hazaya b'klizeh lo Kiddush. But if it's going to be not, so therefore, even if you put them both together, right, they're not going to be kasher for tmei metim. Right? So now, again, we were talking about now here, the mechatat. The mechatat, if you put the waters of the mechatat, which is less than kedei hazaya, we just brought down, there was a machloket, do you need a shiur for hazaya or not by the mechatat at all? Do you need a shiur or not? But now we're saying that if it is that you took less than a kedei hazaya in this kli, and less than kedei hazaya in another kli, right? And then you come and you put them together, it's not going to be mitzaref. So, what about the dam? Can you come now and put the blood in both of them together? Is it going to be mitzaref or not? So what's halacha? So says the Gemara, it's a hilchatahi. This is halacha Moshe Sinai, and therefore you cannot learn halacha Moshe Sinai to something else, right? Or dilma, or maybe hatam over there to do with the mechatat. My tama, what's the reasoning? Tichtiv et taval b'mayim. It says you have to dip it in water, and then you have to be mazeh, which is mashma the tfilat ha'ezov has to be dafka mayim shitkachu mitchila. So therefore, it's not going to help anymore, right? So he says, hachanami sotu here, chtiv, it's written, v'taval bedam. When it says v'taval bedam, that it's going to drip it, you have to dip it in the blood. So he comes and he says, right, what is it coming to teach you, right? He's coming to teach you, right, that it has to be fitting for the tvilat etzban hazah. So Tashema, we're going to try to bring a proof. Tamar bizreka, says bizreka in the name of Rabbi Lazar. Af bedam lo kidesh. Even with the blood of a chatata pnimit, the halacha is a lo kidesh et adam, right? With this utensil, which is going to be pachot mishiur haza'ah, and therefore, since we already make a achra'ah, you know what achra'ah is? We're making achra'ah that this blood is going to be pasul for haza'ah, also the blood which is going to be nitma'et from the chiyuv kibus, and therefore he comes and he says that we're going to learn that it's not going to be fitting for haza'ah. The Amar Rava has come and he says, Tanya, we learned in a braita, v'taval v'lo mesapeg, right? You're mistapag, yeah? V'taval, what does it mean? The Kohen has to come and he has to dip his blood, right, inside of the utensil. V'lo mesapeg. Sorry, what did I say? Sorry, you have to dip your finger. Right? V'taval, you have to dip. You have to dip what? Your finger inside of the utensil. Velo mesapeg. Maza velo mesapeg. Not that you're going to be mekaneach the blood, right? Meaning like this. How do you dip? You put your finger and you come out. That's called dipping. If I have to put my finger and start wiping the like that, that's not called v'taval. So right, the blood, right? So he says badam ad shiye badam shiur l'tvila meikaro, until you have enough that it's going to be good for the blood, right? Min adam shebainyan, and that's what we're talking about. Ve'itzich lemichtav v'taval, and he says you need to write v'taval ve'itzich lemichtav badam, and you have to write down badam. Di'i katav rachmana v'taval. Because if it only wrote down v'taval havamina, I would have had a havamina afal pi deleka shiur tvila meikaro, even though it doesn't have a shiur tvila at the beginning. Katav lachmana badam, therefore it says badam, which means that it has to be that you have to accept the blood lechatchila in another kli. The katav lachmana badam, and if it would have only been written badam havamina, I would have thought sefilu misapeg. Even if you're going to come and you're going to wipe it out from the bottom, it doesn't matter. So therefore you need v'taval. So it says min adam shebinyan lemiute mai. So he says, which means it's coming to exclude the leftover which is on your finger, which means that before each haza'ah, I come and I take my finger, I dip it in the blood, and then I come and I sprinkle. In between each sprinkling, I cannot sprinkle again from the leftover that I have on my finger. I have to dip again, and then I come and I'm going to sprinkle again. This is a proof. Misayele Rabbi Elazar. This is a proof to Rabbi Elazar. Damar Rabbi Elazar. Shiraim shebe'etzba pesulim. According to Shitat Rabbi Elazar, the leftover that you have on your finger is pasul. So I cannot reuse that blood that I have on my finger. I have to come, dip it again. Now I have new blood. I come, now I'm able to do it. Which one? No. So Amale Ravim Barava Ravada Lerav. Says Ravim Baravada to Rav. Amarta nidecha Amar Rav Amram. Says your Talmid, the name of Rav Amram. Tanina, we already learned this in Mishnah. Hayama zeh v'nitezah zamiyado. If right now he's going to come and he's going to sprinkle, right, the blood of a chatat pnimit and the Hechal, v'nitezah zamiyado, and then went on the beged. So he says, ad shelo hiza, until he didn't do the azar at all, you have to wash the clothing. Taun kibus. Mi shehiza. But once he sprinkled, enu taun kibus. You don't have to do it. So says the Gemara, one second, what does it mean now if you already sprinkled? Now you don't have to wash the clothing. We're not talking about that. This is what it means to say. Ad shelo gamar lezahot. That until you didn't finish, so then taun kibus. And once you finished, now you don't need to do kibus? Meaning, I would have thought to say until you finish everything. Because remember, there's a whole bunch of different hazaot that you're doing, right? When you're doing the how do you call this? In the back, in the Hechal, you do much more hazaot than you do on the outside. Right, for example, if it's going to be on the Kippur or other things, you're going to do Sheva Zaot, and you're going to do another one, and then you do on Kippur, you do 41, 43. There's a whole bunch of different opinions, if you remember. So therefore, there's much more. So we're talking about that you finished everything, you didn't finish everything? Says no. This is what we say. Ad shelo yatzat hazam yado. If it didn't go from your hand, right, towards the parochet or the mizbach hazahav, taun kibus, you need kibus. Mishiyatzta hazam yado, once it finished, it went out of your hand, and taun kibus. Now you don't need any kibus anymore. So Abaye comes and he asks the following question: Gamar min lehazot. If the Kohen comes and he finishes to do haza'ah, mekaneach yado, right, begufa shel para. So he's going to wipe his hand on the gufa shel para. Mazek begufa shel para. Because remember that since, right, the leftovers of the blood also need srefa together with it. So gamar, once he finishes, right, right, then he comes and he says, then he's going to come. He needs to wipe off the blood. Lo gamar, if he didn't finish the azaot, lo, he doesn't need it. So Elmaleh, he comes and he says like this: Gamar, if he finished all the azaot, mekaneach yudo begufa shel para. He just comes and he wipes it on the body of the para. So he says lo gamar, but if he didn't do all the hazaot, so mekaneach betzbao. So then he's going to just wipe with the etzba, with the finger, right? Because the shirei adam which is on the finger are going to come. It's not fitting for the hazaot which are going to come up afterwards. So bishlama gamar mekaneach yado begufa shel para. I understand when you finish, you're going to wipe your hands on the body of the para. Shneimar, but it says v'saraf para enough. You're going to burn the para, right? Whether it's going to be ora, besara, vedama, on everything. So therefore, even the shirei adam, you're going to burn it. But how are you going to wash your finger? What do you do with your finger? So Abaye says, bisfat mizrach. You're going to use it on the side of the utensil. right? The kidichtiv, as it says, kefore zahav. Kefore zahav is talking about, right, that the kohen is going to be mechaper. He's going to wipe off his finger between one hazah and another hazah. So in between each hazah, he comes, wipes off his finger on the edge of the utensil. Right, that's what we do nowadays. You know, a woman, many times she comes, she's got whatever it is, a batter. She comes and then she'll wipe her hand or finger, right, on the edge of the utensil, right? And then you could, right, that's what's going to happen. So the exact same thing over here to do with the Kohen. There's a Mishnah on the bottom of the Gimel Mubet. Nitaz ala or. If right now you have blood of the chatat, which is going to be sprinkled on top of the or of a behema which died. Ad shelo uvshat. If they did not skin the animal yet, eno taun kibus. You don't have to wash it. Nishu uvshat. But once you come and it's going to be uvshat, taun kibus. You need the kibus. These are the words of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Elazar says, af nishu uvshat. Even if it's going to be uvshat, the animal, eno taun kibus. You don't need kibus. אין אותו כיבוס על מקום אדם, you don't need to do the כיבוס על מקום אדם, ודבר שהוא ראוי לקבל טומאה, or something which is going to be fitting to לקבל טומאה, וראוי לכיבוס, and it's going to be fitting for כיבוס, אחד הבגד ואחד השק ואחד האור, whether it's going to be the beged, the sack, or the or, טעונים כיבוס, they do need to wash it. והכיבוס במקום קדוש, so where do you wash it? In the עזרה. Okay, but it says, ואשר יזה מדבר על הבגד, תכבס במקום קדוש. שבירת כלי חרס, also when they used to come and break the kli cheres, which they used to come and cook the basar chatat, it has to be also b'makom kadosh, also the same thing. Okay, but they used to come, right? And he says over here like this. He says, not every single time, right? He says, umikau shtifa b'kli nechoshet. And the same thing with the mikau shtifa b'kli nechoshet, always has to be done in makom kadosh, right? So therefore he comes and he says now like this. He says, right? Ze chomer b'chatat mikoche kodashim. This is a chumrah by the chatat more than all the koche kodashim acherim, which means that, you know, all the other ones, it's not the same halakha, but this one specifically, that you're going to be chayav lechabes, right, a beged, that you have blood of the chatat, that's only by the chatat, it's not by anything else. Okay? Says the Gemara, Menanimile. How do we know these words? How do we know that if you have blood, which is going to be nitaz on or on sak, right, how do we know this halakha? So, Tatan Rabbanan, we learned in the Braita, it says in the Torah, V'asher yizeh midama ala beged. He says, V'asher yizeh midama ala beged. What does that mean? En li ela beged. That's only going to be on the beged. Minayin lerabot or. How do I know that it's also going to include the skins? Mishuv shat, once it's skinned. Tamulomar, asher yizeh alea techabes. That you're going to sprinkle it, you're going to wash it. So Yachol, I would have thought to say, Shani minabe or at shelo farshat, that I'm going to include the skins until it was not skinned. Right? So he says, Tamulomar beged. It has to be a clothing. Just like a beged is fitting for kabel tuma. So to anything which is going to be mekabel tuma, obviously this is not skin, so it's not mekabel tuma yet. These are the words of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Elazar comes and he says, beged en ila beged. This is only going to be a clothing. Minayin lerabot sak. How do I know that I include a sack? Right, there's a sackcloth. So he says, v'chol minei begadim, or any type of clothing other than this. So he says, Tamulomar asher yizeh alea techabes. Right, which means that you're going to come and you're going to wash it. So yachol shanimar be'or. I would have thought to say that I'm going to also include the skins which was skinned. Tamulomar beged, just like the beged is divided mekabel tuma, so too it's going to be mekabel tuma. My bena, what's the difference between them? Matzlit, which is going to be less than shalosh ika benaihu, which we'll explain B'ezrat Hashem tomorrow.